Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Munib Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. Brazil has reported record 3,780 COVID-19 deaths in a day, taking its toll to over 317,000. India has registered highest daily deaths from COVID-19 since mid-December, with 354 people dying in the last 24 hours. In Pakistan, over 4,700 people tested positive, while 78 died overnight, pushing the death toll past 14,400. Globally, the virus has claimed over 2.8 million lives and infected 128 million people. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says Pakistan provides Tajikistan a gateway to Central Asia through CPEC. At a joint press conference with his Tajik counterpart, Sirajuddin Mohriddin in Dushanbe, Qureshi stressed the need to boost trade and military ties between the two nations. Pakistan and Tajikistan have agreed to reactivate joint working groups to promote bilateral cooperation in different fields. In Niger, the security forces have reportedly repelled an attempted coup after foiling an attack on the presidential palace. Witnesses say heavy gunfire was heard near the presidency for hours. It comes 2 days ahead of the swearing-in of President-elect Mohamed Bazoum. In Yemen, the army says it has killed a number of Houthi fighters in multiple attacks on rebel positions. The military says it has liberated many areas from Houthi control in the western province of Taiz and oil-rich Marib Governorate. Well, these were the top stories. These in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. Brazil has reported the highest single-day deaths since the pandemic began, with more than 3,700 fatalities overnight. India has reported highest daily deaths from COVID-19 since mid-December, with 354 people dying in the last 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 2.8 million lives and infected 128 million people. More on the pandemic in this report. The socio-economic repercussions of COVID-19 pandemic keep mounting, laying the ground for aftershocks for years to come. A new report by the World Economic Forum says the pandemic has delayed gender parity by a generation. However, in a more promising development, a study shows that T cells, a critical component of the immune system, protect against the three most concerning new variants. As Brazil keeps logging new highs in cases, the president signed an executive order to disperse nearly $1 billion in new loans to fight the pandemic. Meanwhile, in Chile, a sharp rise in infections has put overwhelmed hospitals on high alert.
There has been an increase in demand, so there has been a need for a temporary space. The hospital has set up 2 trailers so as to increase capacity, and we have also approached cemeteries to allow for bodies to be received. This is being done so that what we're going through will not become a problem.
In Europe, Spain has passed a new law making masks mandatory in all public spaces, indoor or outdoor, until the end of the pandemic. Cases in Turkey and Greece have once again hit daily records as the countries push ahead with their inoculation drives. Germany has restricted the AstraZeneca vaccine for people under 60 years.
It is unquestionably a setback for our vaccination campaign that one of the vaccines available to us appears to pose a risk for a certain age group in this pandemic. Up until yesterday, there were 31 reported cases of thrombosis after being vaccinated with the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine. Unfortunately, 9 of them are fatal.
Elsewhere, Australia has fallen 3.4 million doses short of its target of 4 million vaccinations by March 31st, prompting criticism of the government. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, COVID-19 has claimed 78 more lives over the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says more than 4,700 people tested positive for the virus overnight. The ministry said the death toll has risen to 14,434. The virus has infected nearly 668,000 people so far, of which more than 603,000 have recovered. The ministry said the number of active cases has jumped to over 50,000, while the country's positivity rate has shot up to 10.8% today. Foreign Minister Shahmud Qureshi says Pakistan provides Tajikistan a gateway to Central Asia through CPEC. Qureshi said this while addressing a joint press conference with his Tajik counterpart Sirojuddin Mohiruddin in Dushanbe. Foreign Minister Shahmud Qureshi stressed the need to boost trade and military ties between the two nations. Qureshi reaffirmed commitment to CASA 1000 electricity project and said it will benefit the region. Pakistan and Tajikistan have agreed to reactivate joint working groups to promote bilateral cooperation in different fields. The foreign minister also called on Tajik President Imam Ali Rahman as well and congratulated him on his election victory. During the meeting, President Rahman expressed a strong resolve to further increase partnership between the two states. In his meeting with Tajik Defence Minister Colonel General Sher Ali Mirza, Qureshi highlighted the need to further strengthen military ties between the two nations. Shahmud Qureshi also invited the Tajik President and Foreign Minister to visit Pakistan. Now moving to Niger, where security forces have reportedly repelled an attempted coup after foiling an attack on the presidential palace. Witnesses say heavy gunfire was heard near the presidency for hours. It comes 2 days ahead of the swearing-in of the president-elect Mohamed Bazoum. Former President Mahamane Osman, who lost in the runoff, has rejected the results, alleging fraud. Osman had called for peaceful marches across the country. However, authorities banned a planned opposition protest today in the capital, Niamey. Moving on now, the US has called on international companies to consider cutting ties to enterprises that support Myanmar's military. At a news conference, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the military's action against its own civilians are reprehensible. The US State Department also ordered its non-essential embassy staff to leave the country due to unrest. In Myanmar, the activists are holding more protests today despite the military crackdown. Meanwhile, fighting has flared between the army and insurgents in frontier regions, with refugees spilling over borders. Now, more than 520 people have been killed in 2 months of protests against the February 1st coup. Now in Yemen, the army says it has killed a number of Houthi fighters in multiple attacks on rebel positions. The military says it has liberated many areas from Houthi control in the western province of Taiz and oil-rich Marib Governorate. The military also claimed advancing after dealing heavy damage to rebels in the battle for oil-rich Marib Governorate. Meanwhile, Houthis' attacks against the coalition forces continue as well. Earlier, Yemen's foreign ministry said rebels targeted refugee camps north of Marib with artillery and missile shells. The Marib offensive has escalated recently as the calls for international community ramped up to end the war in Yemen. Meanwhile, the Iraqi army says it has destroyed 2 ISIS hideouts in Al-Budhur Al. In a tweet, Defense Minister spokesperson said troops also destroyed a boat and foiled a terrorist operation. He said the joint operation was monitored by the Iraqi Special Forces. Meanwhile, a spokesperson for the United States Operation Inherent Resolve said the forces also committed to upholding security. Colonel Wayne Marotto said the operation aims to stabilize conflict-affected areas. Now in Libya, the rival political factions have reached an agreement to unify the country's divided parliament Lawmaker Fawzi Al-Nuwairi said the presidency of the parliament met in Tripoli. Al-Nuwairi said the stakeholders termed the unification of ministries a gift for the Libyan people. The Libyan parliament is divided between two houses of representatives in Tripoli and Tobruk. Libya's rival groups agreed in a UN-mediated talk last month to form an interim unity government to lead the country till elections. Moving on, now, Egypt says it supports Sudan's call for an international quartet to mediate the trilateral crisis on the Nile Dam project. The Egyptian Minister of Water Resources stressed the need for sincere efforts for the success of the negotiations. He said Ethiopia's unilateral measures regarding the dam's construction will result in repercussions. Earlier, Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi also warned that dam will bring unimaginable instability for the whole region. Ethiopian dam's construction has heightened regional tensions, with the downstream Egypt and Sudan pressing for a deal. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, the international military exercise ACES Meet 2021 is underway at Musharraf Air Base in Punjab province. The air forces of the United States and Saudi Arabia are participating in the drills along with Pakistan Air Force. In a tweet, the Saudi Defense Ministry said a number of its Air Force's Tornado combat aircraft are taking part in the exercise. Bahrain, Egypt and Jordanian Air Forces are attending the drill as observers. The exercise is scheduled to continue till April 10th. It aims to provide an exchange of experiences and expertise in the field of planning and combat. Now, Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the U.S. will speak out about human rights everywhere, including at home. He was presenting the State Department's first human rights report under President Joe Biden. The report criticized Iran, China, Russia and others for violent crackdowns, especially on opposition and minorities. The State Department said a large number of people continue to suffer under brutal conditions in 2020. It added the coronavirus pandemic also placed obstacles to human rights and fundamental freedoms. Blinken tried to dispel the notion that the report targets any country in particular.
Whether it's China, Russia, or anyone else, we're not standing against any of those countries. We're not trying to, for example, contain China or keep it down. What we are about is standing up for basic principles, basic rights, and a rules-based international order that has served us and countries around the world very, very well.
Now, in the United States, witnesses continue to testify on the second day of hearing in the George Floyd murder case that spawned the BLM movement. They described how Derek Chauvin, the former Minneapolis policeman charged with Floyd's murder, was unmoved by their pleas. A Minneapolis firefighter told the courtroom she pled the police to allow her to give Floyd medical attention. She said because of her training, she instantly recognized that Floyd had an altered level of consciousness. The firefighter said she identified herself as a medic, but the police prevented her from giving chest compressions to Floyd. Earlier, the jurors also heard the teenager who recorded the video of Chauvin pinning the neck of Floyd. More news coming up in this news bulletin after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now, SpaceX has announced the final crew members of what they call the world's first all-civilian mission to space. The mission, dubbed Inspiration 4, will be commanded by 38-year-old billionaire philanthropist Jared Isaacman. Christopher Sambrowski and Dr. Shine Proctor will join previously announced crew member Haley Arnear. SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket will launch the crew aboard a Dragon spacecraft later this year. The crew members will undergo commercial astronaut training by SpaceX. The mission is being targeted for 15th of September from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. It will be monitored by SpaceX Mission Control. China has launched a new Earth observation satellite from the Jiaquan Satellite Launch Center. The satellite, Golfan 1202, was launched aboard a Long March 4C carrier rocket. The satellite will be used in land surveys and urban planning. It will determine and register land rights, road network designs, crop yield estimates, and disaster prevention and relief. The latest launch was the 364th mission of the Long March rocket series. In Belgium, a chocolate maker is trying an unusual way to boost his business as the pandemic has kept foreign tourists away from Bruges City. Let's find out how in this report. On a spring day, the picturesque city of Bruges, crisscrossed with canals, is normally humming with foreign tourists. But plummeting visitor number has taken a toll on many of the shops in town. In such times, chocolate maker Dominic Persuni has concocted spring specials ahead of Easter. He says the customer wants to go on an adventure when they are eating something. The former chef is particularly proud of his praline.
So we make a juice of grass, Granny Schmidt, and to put an extra acidity on it, we use the Japanese lime, it's yuzu. And the combination of those two, it's amazing. It's of course important to find the right balance between your chocolate, an origin chocolate, and then those flavors.
Persone says he believes chocolate contains a secret ingredient that has the power to counter the lockdown blues. Customers at his shop echo his sentiment.
What it brings, mostly extra fat, but also extra joy. And I think it's good during these times. Like now I'm gonna buy something for me and my girlfriend because with Corona we're not seeing much of our friends. It's very hard and that makes life a little bit better. So I would say chocolate makes life a bit better.
Belgium is trying to stem the third wave of COVID-19 infections, with most non-food shops open only by appointment. More than 22,000 people have died from the virus in the country, among the world's highest per capita fatality rates. Now in business stories, the Indian rupee has weakened to its lowest level in a month. It comes as traders expect higher demand for dollars due to the financial year end in India. The partially convertible rupee is now at 73.53 per dollar. The rupee advanced about 0.1% in March to 73.38 to a dollar. It pared most of the month's gain as State Bank rushed to buy dollars ahead of the fiscal year end. Experts predict more devaluation in Indian currency amid increasing inflation and continued central bank intervention. Now, the Purchasing Managers Index for China's manufacturing has expanded to its highest level this year. The National Bureau of Statistics says the Manufacturing PMI stood at 51.9% in March, up from 50.6% in February. The NBS data showed China's new export orders index rose 2.4% in March. Meanwhile, the imports index also soared to a new high in recent years as it reached 51.1% mark. China's manufacturing sector has now remained in expansion territory for 13 straight months. This follows ramped up production at factories nationwide, while upbeat export orders providing a further boost. Meanwhile, European stocks are trading in mixed territory, reflecting sentiment in the Asia-Pacific and the US markets. Investors will be keeping an eye on details of President Joe Biden's infrastructure plans. The pan-European stock 600 hovered around the flat line, with telecoms gaining while banks slipped marginally. CAC 40 in Paris and Frankfurt's DAX shed fractionally each. Italy's FTSE MIB gained close to 0.5%, while FTSE in London edged down around 0.25%. And now let's have a look at how the weather is doing around the world. And And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.